Hello, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to some of you. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to our webinar, Shifting Compliance Left, which is building compliance into the start of the supply chain. I am Shannon Hines from Quick Code. We are today's sponsor. I'd like to thank AAEI and all of you actually for joining us to discuss what it means to shift compliance left. We talk about that a lot at Quick Code. Our panel, whom I'll introduce in a moment, includes trade compliance professionals who have either started the transition or at least starting to think about it within their organizations, their leaders within their organizations who are really concerned about this, this challenge of having a visibility into the supply chain earlier, compliance data earlier in the process. Before we dive in to our discussion, a few quick reminders. We encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A feature. We certainly will try to address as many of as we can at the end of the discussion. And this session is being recorded, so we will send a link with to registrants within a couple of days. A little bit about our speakers. I'm joined today by Robert Thompson, who is a senior specialist of global trade compliance at Bass Pro Shops. Chad Bassell, who hopefully will join us. He's having some technical difficulties. International Trade Officer at Worth Industry. And Kyle Grobler, who is the Global Trade Compliance Manager at TE Connectivity. Welcome, and thank all of you for joining us today. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about our speakers, you can click on the Resources tab at the bottom of the screen. So to start our discussion, I think I'll start with you, Kyle. I'm wondering if you would talk to us a little bit about, and I'll ask all three of you this, talk to us a little bit about what shifting compliance left means in your organization. I think it's to set the level for everyone about what we're talking about when we talk about shift compliance left. What does it mean in your organization and in the context of trade?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to having this discussion. So for me, when I think of shifting compliance to the left, I really think of how do we go from being reactive, firefighting, fixing errors, to more preventative, designing out risk mitigation, right? So being more proactive in our compliance and our approach.
Great. Robert, how about at Bass Pro Shops? How do you guys think about it?
Couldn't agree more with Kyle. Trying to be more proactive, look into the future and see what's coming in, what we've got to deal with in the near future, rather than waiting till it's already here and having to deal with it at that time it lands in the US.
Yeah, right. And Chad, how about you? Welcome.
How's it going, everybody? Thank you for having me. And this is a topic that is very near and dear to our hearts. We've been working on this project of moving things continuously upstream through the supply chain as much as possible. And I mean, I have to go with what Kyle and Robert said. It's really a matter of all of the things that we end up worrying about are usually things that were known quantities by somebody at some point earlier. And the only difference is that nobody was paying attention until you really needed it. And I always try to tell people that you don't really start making Thanksgiving dinner at noon on Thanksgiving. You need to start shopping a couple of days before, and you start prepping stuff out, because there's points at which you can do things that are not the day of. And if you're trying to scramble to feed a party of 20 like at the last minute, it's not going to be fun. So what can you possibly do? If you read your Thanksgiving cooking tips, it's basically the same thing, just applying it to compliance.
That's funny. So, Chad, I'm going to stay with you then and kind of work back around. If we think about then starting a process, and let me tell you, I've talked to so many customers who'll say to me, I'll say, have you thought about, moving some compliance, providing compliance information to procurement or to product development or to sales? They say yes, but it's hard. So, or yes, I'd love to do it, yes, and all the things. So lots of people agree it's a good idea. Do you have any suggestions, Chad, on what are practical first steps? Where's a good place to start? We'll start with you, Chad, but I'm going to ask everyone, what's a good place to start, or where have you guys started?
Well, I kind of mentally break it down into big questions and small questions. And what we find, it's really hard to deal with the small questions. It's really easy to deal with the big questions. big questions are what's going to cause me problems, like at a big level. If I bring X from Y, it's going to cause me an issue. And that's really easy to talk to sourcing on and talk to people. They get the message real quick that if they buy this from this country, it's going to cause problems, or that here's where your issues are. And then the trick is then leveraging that into the small questions of product 123 has issue 123 on it, and then how do we actually know that somebody before they get to place a PO is going to cause a problem? And that's always the challenge that we're facing. And I wish I had an answer for it, but the answer depends on the project and the problem. And I call them little questions because they're all very ticky-tacky and specific.
So, so is it like historically, would you find people from those parts of the organization coming to you and asking questions, or not even asking questions? Like how have you managed it?
I mean, it's all about communication and getting yourself out there and getting people to know that you're a resource and they should talk to you. I mean, compliance is one of those weird pieces of business where it's all encompassing. It hits every aspect of the business. So ultimately, if you're not in there with design and sourcing and talking about the problems and things that they're going to be doing next year and 2 and 3 years out, then you're just setting yourselves up for problems down the line. So it's just a matter of knowing people, talking to people, making sure that everybody knows that you're a resource, getting out in front of people with your priorities and listening to what their priorities are, and then a lot of this is going to just vary by product. And obviously right now we're dealing with some very interesting topics because the government situations have made this front and center. And so I've started encouraging people to think of compliance as a quality aspect. If I want a screw to be made of stainless steel, then somebody needs to spec that. And if they want the country of origin to be Thailand, well, they need to spec that too.
Right.
So, and if you're not, it's compliance is no longer a lottery ticket. It's it's now you can't just scratch off and win. You have to plan for it.
Right. Robert, how about at Bass Pro Shops? How have you guys been thinking about practically how you can implement something, or what have you done? You know, do you have meetings? Do you have presentations? How do you deal with that?
Sure. Well, it was kind of an accidental thing a couple of years ago when we fell into shifting this to the left. Came about by noticing some misclassifications and missed country of origins. And so through discussions with it was an apparel, so discussions with the product developers in apparel, begin making those inroads to get information sooner so that we could prevent these mistakes in the future. And branching out from apparel, it went on to our hard lines and our hunting and camping gear, stuff like that, fishing gear, so that now more, I won't say we're totally there, but more people are coming to us, and especially now in this last year since Liberation Day, people are coming to us more and saying, "Hey, I'm bringing this in from China. Are my tariffs changed?" Oh yeah, they've changed a little bit. Definitely. We get a lot more questions these days, asking about, what are my duties going to be? What is my expected landed cost going to be? Is there any way I can reduce my duties and tariffs? It's a work in process. It's something that nobody in the company's really thought about or had to think about up until recently. And it's kind of there's some growing pains right now, definitely.
Robert, did you conduct any, so you said people come to you. Number one, I'm assuming that they were aware of you before, but have you thought about, or have you done any campaigns where you reach out to those organizations, parts of the organization? Are they interested in seeing you? Do they look at you as just one more thing? Are they, how do you let them know that you are a resource available to them?
Their view of us has changed. We're kind of tucked away in the back and not thought about entity for a long time. And we have done a little bit of outreach, being more visual. Instead of trying to email all of our product developers and our buyers. I try and go meet with them face to face, put a face with what we do, explain the process. I don't just go over there and say, "Hey, what's this shirt made out of?" I say, "Hey, tell me what this shirt is, how you made it. Here's why. If maybe we can lower the duty rate on it if you tell me that it's got more cotton or something to that effect, or you are going to put a water resistance barrier on it and we can lower the duty rate there." We've kind of tested the waters about setting up like little, not a kiosk necessarily, but going over and sitting closer to that group for a week or so they get used to us and asking questions. We've done that once this year, and it seemed to go over really well.
Great. Yeah, good suggestions. Kyle, how about you? How about at TE Connectivity? What have you tried? You know.
So this is a great question, right? And for me, it derives of three pillars. So Chad alluded to it earlier. So we first mentioned proactiveness. How can we be proactive with our business, our stakeholders? Every department is a stakeholder, right? So how can we be proactive in articulating the value that we can bring to them, speaking to their pain points, right? So, sometimes I'll meet with our finance team and say, "Hey, look, what are some of your struggles? What are you going through?" And then I will communicate the very next point. I'll communicate how the trade team, when leveraged correctly, can help the finance team, get some of their problems resolved. And again, with this, it's always going to be a marathon. As much as we would love it to be a sprint, even though now we're more front and center than we've ever been, it's always going to be an ongoing conversation. And again, communication is key, right? So having something like office hours is something that's great, getting the word out, speaking to different departments, speaking to their problems and how trade can alleviate some of those problems has been really, really key for us. And then again, it's just ongoing. So we're also going to do an AMA, so Ask Me Anything, right? So where we're getting our organization to come together and say, "Hey, look, guys, this is what we do. And let's just really get the conversation going." So again, for me, it's education, communication, and proactiveness. And it's always going to be an ongoing discussion. It's never going to be, "Hey, it's a sprint and here's the finish line."
Do you have any official channels? And this actually is for any of you. Do you have any official methods? I'll start with you, Kyle. Ways for someone in another department, sourcing, procurement, sales, to reach out to you? Do you have official channels? Like, how do you manage that? And how do you manage the bandwidth? I mean, it's part of the reason to shift compliance left and actually gives people tools is to reduce. So because you don't have the bandwidth, I'm going to guess, on any given day to actually answer all the questions. So do you have any ways that you are reaching out or providing a mechanism back and forth?
Yeah, right. So it's like sometimes we have like a ticketing system. So for example, if there's some, special needs or requirements within our organization, we'll have a ticketing system and that will go out to certain individuals within our group or team. That's kind of the only one channel that, comes front of mind. But we're still, busy building on trying to make, I think like any and every trade practice, we're still fine tuning, finding what works and what doesn't work, right? And just because we've implemented something today doesn't necessarily mean that's the thing that we're going to implement 2 or 3 years from now.
Yeah.
I'm all about, hey, let's test it. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, let's go back to the drawing board. We found out a way not to do it, right? So we haven't lost absolutely all our time. But again, it's always with the trade program, it's always going to be an ongoing operation. As trade evolves, as people evolve, as organizations evolve, as supply chains evolve, customs evolve, it's always going to be ongoing.
Yeah, great. Chad, how about you? Any official ways, anything you're trying to implement to make it easier for your colleagues to get information from you or get it for themselves?
Yeah, so we got a couple of things that go on. In general, we try to eliminate the questions as much as possible. We are always looking for products and ways that we can either self-serve or just automate and make the process flow. We take open PO reports, and we've got a classification team that every week gets every open PO and screens it versus all of the products we have classified. And any product that's not on there goes into a queue to get classified automatically. So that takes care of a lot of the problems, or it pushes the issues to the point 6 months ahead of when things are going to ship, when they can be easily resolved, as opposed to like when it's on a boat and it's very hard to change anything.
Right.
We're also looking at some projects, and we're looking at Quick Code specifically as a way to be able to push some of this information out to buyers and sellers so that so our purchasing team could get some of this information. With us, the tariff codes are not usually actually the thing that I'm really worried about. What I'm usually worried about is the sneaky stuff, the PGAs, the steel licenses, the anti-dumping things that come up. And all of that stuff is stuff that is, even if I just do an HTS check, it might not show. And so I've been continuously for the last several years looking for ways to push this to the foreground and get I mentioned the big and little, get the little stuff to the people when they need it. So they have product specific information at the time when they need to be making purchasing decisions. So we've been working with QuickCode to try to implement a solution on that, and I'm pretty excited about how that's going to go, because there's a lot of information in that platform I think is very useful to us. And then before that, we've done our own spreadsheet versions and databases, and then just lots of communication. The big challenge you have is that you can tell somebody and train them and get them to understand you, and they can learn everything, and that does absolutely no good if that person then leaves the organization. And so with large organizations, you're just always going to have people coming and going and moving to positions and changing roles. And so you're constantly going to have to be outreaching and talking to people and training people. And the hard part isn't getting the information in front of people, it's getting the information in front of all the people that need it all the time, because there's a lot of them.
Right. Robert, how about you? Do you guys have any official channels back and forth? Have you developed any processes or workflows to help your colleagues get the information that they need from you without literally, coming in and interrupting your daily workflow as it is?
What we've done so far, and it hasn't worked for us. We implemented or set up a new quote tariffs email address rather than our normal trade compliance inbox. And it worked okay for a week or so, and then it just kind of died off. Occasionally we'll get an email or two with people asking questions. It generally is still, and I think it's just the way the company has been run for so long, is it's an email, or they just assume they know. We have pushed QuickCode out to several of our buyers and product developers to use. Some of them are. One thing that I try and emphasize when they're using it, I try and show them how easy it is. And if they have any questions, what we over in trade compliance really love is the access to cross rulings. So if you have a question about, is this hunting vest an outerwear vest, or is it in 6307 as something completely different? You can go and look at cross rulings. I use that example because I literally just classified that item a minute ago, but that's a great resource to go and not only help us out, but educate yourself on your own product too. You'll figure out what your landed cost is going to be when you import it, what your duty responsibility is going to be. Are there other PGAs involved if you're importing scopes or laser rangefinders, etc.? You can kind of expect what is going to be asked of you coming through, and it's not a surprise next time. So we're really excited about trying to push that element more so going forward.
So along those lines, I think, and this is also for all of you, and by the way, thanks for that nice plug for QuickCode. Of course, we appreciate it. But I think the question is, and it's a challenge, right? You guys are the subject matter experts in the organization. You have certainly been serving a purpose, doing your job, continuing your role, and then Liberation Day happened. And now all of a sudden, you really are the people who know this information more than anyone else. How do you think about, and I know Robert said he's pushed some QuickCode down to some of his suppliers, his colleagues, I'm sorry, some of his procurement guys and product guys, but it really is, you really are a subject matter expert, they are not. How do we think about, and I'll start with you, Robert, how do we think about making that information more digestible for those colleagues in terms of figuring out what they need? I think it would be hard to say, okay, we have to worry about this tariff and this tariff and this tariff. How do you even think about that? I think that would be extremely difficult. Like I said, you're trained, they are trained in something else. How do you think about communicating that information?
Kind of like what Chad mentioned, I'm not so much worried about the correct HT code.
Mhm.
It's the information that I can gather from that. The information is king when you're trying to classify something. And we get weird stuff like small refrigerators. And if you try to classify a refrigerator, you know that one of the requirements to do that is the refrigerated cubic meters or something like that. Nobody knows that. But if people can start thinking in that headspace and give me that information up front, I don't care that they classified it correctly in quick code because I can always approve or deny it
Mhm.
and go from there and maybe educate them later.
Mhm.
But as a tool to get them in kind of in a mindset think, because I think going forward, you're going to have to think compliance and all the regulatory information, such as tariffs, getting them in that little bit of a mindset to think, what is this product? What's it going to cost me to land it in the US? I think that's a win-win for everybody. And if they can start doing that earlier and earlier in the process, it just makes the whole business better. You're better set for the future.
Yeah, Kyle, I ask you the same question. When we start talking to people in our colleagues that are in sales and procurement and product development, obviously they don't speak the same language you do. How do you think about educating them well enough that they can do what they need to do without making them, really frustrating them with your language? Oh, sorry. Well, yeah. So
You answer that question again.
yes, of course. As you
Interrupt.
think about, of course, as you think about connecting this, trying to educate your colleagues that are in procurement and sales and product development, they don't speak the same language you do necessarily when it comes to compliance. You are the subject matter expert, and yet you really need them to understand the importance and the value of some of these things, especially as they're doing quoting, especially as they're purchasing. How do you think about educating them or giving them enough information, whether it's through a product, whether it's through some kind of cheat sheet? Like, how do you think about getting them to have that information and make it valuable to them, especially now,
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head again, is you need to speak the language that they speak, right? So how can I say what's important to me and speak it in a language to make it as important to you? So it's really about understanding your audience and tailoring your message to the procurement team, to the sales team, so they can understand why it's important, as opposed to saying, hey, the classification has a tariff, like I've already lost everyone.
Yeah,
Like you
right.
can't speak like that, right? You can't say, oh, COO country, like it doesn't mean anything to them. But when you start to communicate in terms that they understand how it impacts them, then the penny drops, right? They say, okay, well, when I order this material, that's still, there is a cost implication. It's no longer 2%, it's now 25%, 50%. This is definitely going to have a massive, a massive potential issue or problem with our customers when quoting. So it's really about, again, for me, compliance, the longer I'm in it, it's all about communication and education and understanding your audience. It's really and truly about understanding your audience. When you understand your audience, the message should be tailored accordingly and it will resonate. Because oftentimes I've been guilty of this. I've walked into a meeting, I'm like, again, customs classification, valuation, tariff codes, and everyone's like, oh my God, what is this guy talking about? Right? So it's again 100% tailoring your message to the audience. Now, if it's just trade professionals, go ahead, talk what they, what they call customies, right? Like do it all day. But when you're speaking to other people that don't speak our language, that aren't, integrated into our day-to-day, it's really about tailoring the message to them so they can understand it and it resonates.
Making it simple, right? Steel, aluminum, copper, right? Country of origin. Chad, how about you? How about how are you thinking about that?
Oh, I'm a person that always goes and tries to figure out the language that the person's talking in, and I like pictures.
Yeah.
Pictures are good.
Yes.
People understand. If you put words in front of people, they won't read. Humans don't read boring text. That's everybody on the internet will tell you that. Ask your kids; they'll tell you no one reads text. So pictures are good. And I also, you talk to people, and I love using food analogies. Everybody understands food. It's if you talk about steel and aluminum content, you'll get them lost. But if you talk about it in terms of how much beef is in the cheeseburger, they'll understand that real fast. So
right. Yeah.
So yeah, finding a term and a language that people understand, that they can relate to, knowing your audience. and then if it is an incredibly dense, complicated thing, drill it down to the essential elements and the places that are really going to actually make a difference. And as a customs compliance person, you want to get all the facts right and all the details right. You have to be willing, when you're talking with a purchasing or a buyer, to just omit all the actual important stuff and just drill it down to the this bad, don't do that, this okay, this, and get rid of all the ifs and the and buts, and just drill it down to the absolute most cartoonish version of the truth as you possibly can. I also, so along those lines, I also like to do kind of what I think of as a tiered approach. A lot of times, if we're trying to get this information upstream, then people will say, I don't have this information yet. We don't have a drawing. We haven't even drawn the thing yet. How can I give you a drawing? And so at that point, I could say, this is what I have. Based on this, here's your information. And it's going to be, here's my worst case scenario. I'm going to throw everything in the kitchen sink in there. If I've got a possibility of 3 tariffs, I'm going to take the most expensive of those tariffs and say it's going to be this amount. And then they say, oh my God, that's that's really expensive. Can you make it cheaper? And I'm like, yeah, if you can give me more information, I can take it down. They give me a little bit more information. I say, great. Now I can eliminate this tariff. So now it's just a consideration between these two. Your worst case scenario now looks like here. And then we can keep going back and forth until they can either have to accept reality, or they find or they can run out of information they can give me. One of those two. But you know, we can keep furthering the compliance. We don't have to go to the definitive answer, especially while things are in earlier stages. We can go to a good enough answer, and get them the information, because they just need to make a decision. Do I buy this from this place or not? Yes, no. And ultimately it's going to come down to a yes, no for them. They don't necessarily have to have the penny margin exactly right. They just need to know yes, no. So what information do I have to give them in order for them to get to their yes, no?
Right. I think we talked about that. I've talked about that with you before, Chad, is that
Yeah.
for those guys, for your colleagues in those departments, good and close enough is good enough, right? What you're really trying to say is there an advantage between one or the other? And so along those lines, and this is going to be for all of you, but I'll start with Chad. Are you finding yourselves more? I'm not going to say less, because I'm certainly not less, but are you finding yourselves involved in the conversations more around, especially with reciprocal tariffs, sourcing from A versus B in a way that you weren't necessarily before? I know, you know, there's always been we've always had anti-dumping concerns. We've also always had all the other kinds of concerns that we have, entities, et cetera. But in terms of making those decisions about sourcing from A versus B, given the different tariffs and the cost difference, et cetera, are you involved in those conversations more? And if not, this is your chance, please.
So oddly, I would say that right now the answer is no. I'm actually involved less in that specific conversation. Different conversations have involved way more. But we're really impacted by the steel and the aluminum tariffs, because we do fasteners, a lot of fasteners, and most of the fasteners are steel. So it's going to hit most of our stuff. And the steel tariffs really don't care too much. And the places that we can exempt it from, a lot of them aren't making fasteners. Like there's not a giant UK fastener industry. So it's not that much of a question. Back when we were getting hit with anti-dumping stuff, then it was a very big topic. We've taken all those hits and incorporated those answers. So until the anti-dumping pipeline starts spitting out more dumping cases, knock on desk, then we'll probably be pretty steady. If I was dealing more with reciprocal tariffs, this would be a much bigger issue for me.
Right. How about you, Robert? You probably are hitting more of those reciprocal tariffs and not the steel and aluminum tariffs. Are you finding yourself involved in those conversations more about sourcing?
A little bit more. Not so much on sourcing, but it's that future. It's the buyer wanting to calculate their landed cost, or the vendor now also wanting to know what possible tariffs they're going to be subject to. But yeah, it's very little at this point. I don't think it's quite set in completely. These are probably going to stick around for a while. unfortunately.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. All right, Kyle, how about you?
Yeah, I think I have to agree with, both the gentlemen on here. From my side, not so much, but to Chad's point earlier, when it was ADD and CBD, at my previous roles, we were looking at, sourcing from other countries and etc. So that's when it played, a massive role in some of our supply chain in some of my previous roles.
Yeah, yeah. I am sort of the opinion is that as we educate maybe our colleagues a little more, then they understand that you are subject matter experts and you actually might have some really good information to help supply these colleagues with information that helps them make good choices, whether they're sales guys who are trying to estimate and quote, whether they're procurement and product development people who are trying to figure out where to source, et cetera. We do have some questions, and a couple of them are focused on this, and I'd love to get everyone's opinion on it. So speaking of allowing the buyers and other users and others using classification tools, concern of non-compliance people choosing HTS, that's from Kelly. And Billy asks a similar question. Do you really want your buyers and others that are not subject matter experts making judgment? I absolutely understand the challenge of this because we all know how hard it is to classify. Robert, we'll start with you. I think I kind of know where everyone's going to land, but I will start with you and say, what's your thoughts on that? And how would you manage that?
So we wouldn't, and we don't allow them to make the final judgment call at the end of the day. Yesterday I worked on an entire new item setup form that was wool socks that were classified as cotton. Yeah, I don't pass that through onto our broker. I change the HT codes, make the updates in our system. But the fact that they, gave it a shot, I got to applaud them for that. They were thinking a little bit, but they were wrong. We talked about it and made the changes necessary. So at the end of the day, it's still on to trade compliance, GTC, classification specialist to make the end call in determination using tools like quick code, cross rulings, etc., to properly classify something. But again, it's the information that helps us, and if that's a door in for them, great, more power to them.
Right, and kind of opens their eyes to the fact that there are these other concerns, whether they're still
Absolutely.
whether there's reciprocal, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Kyle, how about you?
Yeah, I think, I have to second that. At the end of the day, the trade compliance team are the subject matter experts. But in saying that, we also need to leverage the people that also know it, for example, the engineers, right? So they know the ins and outs of some of the materials. So leveraging them as an expert is giving us more guidance in order to be able to come to the correct, classification is always going to be key. So stakeholder, decider, right? So that's kind of how I see that. So whether that might be a buyer, sometimes the buyer might have the subject matter expertise, or the engineer, or whoever that may be, different departments, etc. We have to leverage them as a stakeholder to get to the answer. Ultimately, picking the answer, that makes me a bit nervous.
But yeah, absolutely. Chad, I'm gonna go ahead.
So I have a slightly different view on it, which is that I think that it's a different question. If you remember the words of the great philosopher Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, life will find a way. So the question isn't whether you want these people to be doing the classification, it's do you want to be part of the conversation or not? Because if you say no, then they're going to create their own little cheat sheets and do it without you. And then they're completely out of control. Now, whether if you're controlling your brokers, that will mean nothing, but they're still going to be making their sourcing decisions based on whatever piece of handed down information they happen to have on hand. So you're either part of that conversation or you're not, but the conversation is going to happen. And so what I'm looking for really, as we're talking about pushing this upstream, is ways to have that conversation in a better, more controlled circumstance. And that's why I like the process, like what Robert outlined, because it does give them control over what decisions are being made and visibility to those decisions. And a lot of this is about having the visibility to that conversation, knowing the conversation needs to be had, knowing who you need to talk to with it. And so anything you can do to get information out there, and then also identify who the conversations need to be had with. Those are going to be always keys to identifying and pushing this information upstream and pushing better information. And as Kyle kind of alluded to, you're always going to have questions and concerns and comments and education and all this to go on with. And so just knowing that information is going to be the key to the compliance person being able to drive compliance through the organization. People once they know you're there and will help them, they will flock to you, and you don't have to worry about that. The tribal knowledge engine will spread that knowledge for you. You just have to get it to that level where they understand that you're there and that you can help them.
Right,
I'll,
right.
I'll add on to that a little bit. You mentioned them wanting to create their own cheat sheets. When I first took over this role, that was something that was requested of me several times, and I fought that very hard. Because you don't have the information, you don't have the expertise, you don't have the background to know what makes. I use apparel a lot because that's what I mainly focus on. But you don't know what makes a sweater, a sweatshirt, or a sweatshirt. You don't know that to be a sweatshirt, you need to be brushed or napped on the inside. You don't know those things. I do. So that has definitely opened up that conversation. Or stitch count. They didn't even realize that there was a stitch count requirement for a sweater, or that there were different types of t-shirts, and that's opened that conversation up. So now that does come to me more often than not, saying, hey, I have this shirt jackets were a big thing last year. I have this shirt jacket. Well, there's no classification for a shirt jacket. So here's the criteria that it needs to meet to fall into a jacket or a shirt. Let's work through this together and figure it out.
Right. So I'm thinking, I'm hearing this, talking with the guys who are actually bringing the product in. That's what your company's all about, right? Revenue. If we think about this, and this is a tricky question, I know, but does compliance or really efficient compliance and a compliance machinery that can work across the organization, does it really become a competitive advantage over your competitors? Is there an advantage if you're doing that better than someone else? I'll start with Kyle on that. Is there a competitive advantage to doing something like this? Because that's how you're going to get buy-in, right? That's how you're going to ultimately get buy-in. So I would maintain there is a competitive advantage. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Go ahead, Kyle.
I think it's kind of like sometimes asking how long is a piece of string, right? So what I might find competitive, for me or my organization might be competitive in one aspect, but another organization might be leveraging something else that makes them more competitive, right? So I think it's all about asking, from a business aspect, does this make sense? Does it improve our competitiveness in whatever way? Are we able to service our customers better? Do we have better data transparency? Do we understand where some of our risks lie? I think these are the questions that we need to ask. And then as a business decision, hey, this will make us more competitive because we're able to be more compelling in these areas, right?
Right, exactly. Chad, how about you?
I always think it's a hard one to measure, because how much competitive advantage do you get by stopping at every stop sign you see? I mean, it honestly takes you longer, and somebody that runs all the stop signs may get to the destination faster up until they don't. And at that point, they're not going to have a car anymore, and hopefully they won't have massive hospital bills, and everybody will be all right. But how much money do you save every time you stop at the stop sign because you don't run into, or you don't get into a wreck?
Right.
It's kind of an unknowable, because a lot of the stuff that we're doing is, the entry is not the end point. The entry is the beginning. This is what I've been driving through our compliance organization, and that we're looking at a 5-year span of record keeping on every normal entry. And we have to be prepared at the time when the thing arrives in the US to defend our decisions in 5 years. And that's the thing that we're really driving at. And so, I can't tell you what the impact is today. What's it going to be 5 years from now if you didn't do your homework today and you go to try to reopen those records and you don't have the information that customs wants? What's that bill going to be? I can't even imagine. And especially right now with the tariffs where they are, if you're taking steps to make your bottom line better now that you can't back up when customs comes at you later. I mean, I have no idea what those bills are going to be, but I'm looking at the Homeland Security budget right now and thinking that some of that's going to port into auditors at some point.
Right.
So yeah, it's all about risk, and putting values on that risk, and what is that risk? What are the fees, fines, penalties, and then all of the other stuff that comes with that.
Right.
That's where we put our money.
Yep. Robert, do you have
mainly.
a thought on that, on competitive advantage for getting the compliance across the enterprise for trade
I
compliance?
Yeah, I don't think I could add much more than what Kyle and Chad said there. They pretty much summed it all up. Yeah.
Okay, so I know we're running out of time. I want to say that I have a couple more questions. I think you've sort of answered this, but I want to give you an opportunity to say if there's anything else. I feel like obviously the past 9 months have dramatically transformed the trade compliance landscape. And if you could just say like the biggest change to you in your role has been in the past 9 months. Robert, what has that been? What have you seen the transformation been for you? Or maybe there hasn't been one. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So,
Sorry, I had a message come in. Can you repeat the question?
yeah, I would say that we know that the past 9 months have been crazy in terms of the trade compliance landscape.
Mhm.
What has been the biggest change for you in terms of your day-to-day, in terms of your role, the things that you're seeing, and where do what do you see happening in the foreseeable future with that?
My role in classification has greatly increased on the daily workload of new item setup forms coming in has increased 100-fold. And I think that's going to get more as we move on because people want to, again, it comes down to that landed cost. That's the big phrase that gets kicked around in the last 2 months. What's my landed cost? What's my landed cost going to be? How can I save? What can I do to change this? What programs can we participate in? Is there anything out there that we can do FTA wise? Those kind of conversations were once a year, if that, 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's almost a weekly, if not an almost daily topic of conversation.
Yeah. How about you, Kyle?
Yeah, I think I have to agree with that. Classification has always been one of the pillars of customs compliance. But over the last period, I would say for us, for me specifically, our classification requests have definitely skyrocketed, and also understanding some of the nuances and to Robert's extent, what is our landed cost, and that is definitely a conversation that I am hearing more, not just. I'm hearing more in general, right? If I'm speaking to someone at the coffee shop who asks me what I'm doing, right, that's something that, because tariff is now front of mind, that's a question that they ask. So, and that is also, directly correlated also to some of the products that you'll be importing, right? So definitely for me, it's also been classification.
Yeah, yeah. Jan, how about you?
So two things really on classification. We had a very robust framework in place for doing import classification, and so that's been just rolling forward just as it was. But the big change has been that as we sell to our customers, a lot of those customers then take our product out of the country to Mexico and Canada, make stuff, and then bring it back in. And so now they're wanting to know a lot more information on our domestically purchased materials, which many of those were also purchased from foreign distributors that brought them in. So that just because they're bought in the U.S. doesn't mean that they're made in the U.S. So we've had a lot more increase in demand for information about domestically procured parts. And then I've been on a lot more calls with customers who are suddenly a lot more interested in customs compliance. So I've never talked to as many customers in over the course of a year as I'm talking to in the course of a week nowadays. So that's been very interesting. We're definitely getting a lot more actively involved in the sales component, because as we're getting costs, we're having to pass them on. In the industrial space, that's the money comes in, the money goes out. It's all passed through information in one way or another. And like I said earlier, that with the steel and the aluminum tariffs, things are fairly straightforward. Unfortunately, I wish they were more complicated, because it's a straightforward 50%. If they were more complicated, it would be cheaper.
It would be easier. Well, and we didn't talk at all about moving compliance so far left that you actually deal with the customer. So I think that's really interesting to hear you say that they're taking an interest. Like, are you sure? I'm guessing they're saying, are you sure this is right? Or are they
Well, as the steel and the aluminum tariffs are driving into more and more and more derivatives, then more and more advanced products have to know more and more basic details that there is no reason why anybody should ever have to know. But the way that these things are built up, then it becomes very interesting to a lot of people how much steel is involved in their machinery components.
Absolutely.
And very expensive as things go back and forth across borders. It's and as I keep trying to tell people, customs right now is not interested in saving you a dime.
Yeah.
They are not.
Yeah, I think also for like the first time, like my family actually knows what I do.
They understand it, you do. I've heard other people say that too.
I get my mother-in-law on the phone. She's like, "Oh, have you heard all these tariffs? It's absolutely awful." I'm like, "Mom, come on. That's what I do for a living."
I have heard that from many of our customers. Okay, well, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, a couple tips that came in on the Q&A line, which have to do with training. And I think Billy's interesting. We do quarterly trade essentials training with key stakeholders. I love that idea, such as sourcing and procurement, to help drive them to compliance and give them visibility into these teams. I love that. And Lauren says, yeah, it's training, training, training. Chemists and food scientists are not necessarily trade compliance experts, but they need to have some visibility into the trade compliance space. It touches every single thing that crosses our borders. So thank you guys for those comments. Finally, when it comes to now where we are, the state of the geopolitical space that we're occupying, and the concerns for trade compliance have moved up higher in the organization. I would say, have you fielded, and I don't want you guys to give away anything that you're not comfortable with, but have you fielded requests from C-suite? Are you seeing requests from C-suite members about, it could be anything. I won't even lead you, and I'll start with Kyle on that. Are you seeing questions about that, about trade compliance from the C-suite?
Yeah, I think especially given the current climate that we find ourselves in, it's definitely a topic of conversation, and it's at least from my experience and what I'm seeing, again, not just in organizations, from people that I know down the road and people running businesses, that I'm friends with, that it now is a C-suite conversation. They are asking questions and they are interested, which for us is a okay. There's a two problem right there. So of course it's good for us to have a seat at the table, but now it's also extra pressure on us to deliver, right? Because now it's not like, hey, we want you at the table because we know what an asset you can be to the business. Like, hey, now you need to save us some money. How can we mitigate all this, right? So I think it also brings a lot of undue pressure, but it also in the next light, it's also great to now finally get some of the recognition that we've been trying to advocate for such a long time. But again, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So definitely it has a lot of people's attention from the C-suite down, right? So like even if I'm just talking to, again, average people around the world, they're talking about it, right? This conversation has been probably the most spoken about than I've ever been in my career of 13 years, right? So I think if that's maybe one good thing that's come out of this, is now we have the recognition. We're no longer a back office job. People do see the privileges and the things that we can do for the business. So I think it's a good thing.
Great. Robert, how about you? Are you seeing requests from the C-suite in your organization?
I will put it like this. 4 years ago, I pitched around and talked to several people in there about the first sale program. No bites. 3 months ago, flooded with emails asking if I've heard about this thing called first sale.
You're like,
So yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of interest now. Yeah, definitely. And a lot of it coming from the upper levels too in that C-suite. Yeah.
No surprise, I think. Chad, how
Yeah.
about you?
We've had active engagement with the C-suite for years now, so this has been a critical part of our compliance organization since I started in 2017 with Worth. So we've always had that higher level engagement. But that said, you can't pay the duty bills we're having to pay now without having people asking lots of very specific questions and having lots of interest. So the amount going out of our pockets into customs pockets will always trigger those kinds of C-suite conversations. And I'm struggling to imagine a situation where they don't.
Yeah. I mean, if we just look at the amount of money that's going out, of course, it's gonna raise the level of the C-suite. So, all right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. We're just about out of time. I want to thank our panelists especially for joining us and sharing their perspectives on this. Please note that this webinar has been approved for credit, and the verification code will be mailed out to all the attendees shortly. Certainly, if you'd like to learn more about the upcoming AAEI programs, you can visit their website or use the resources tab. And we hope you will consider coming to future AAEI webinars, as they're a great source of information and often credit. So thanks to the panelists, thanks to AAEI for making the time. And last but not least, thanks to all of you. There will be a very short survey at the end, so please feel free to fill that out as well. We really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao.